Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Amanda and I'm happy that you're here. Yeah, that's right. My Midnight's cardigan came and I am absolutely in love. I love it. It's got the stars on the front. But bam! Stars on the back. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite one yet. Today I'm excited to celebrate with you the season finale of Midnight Murmurs, Stories for Swift Nights. I can't believe this is the 18th episode, and I think that's the first time I have said the title in an episode of the show. I honestly can't believe we are 18 episodes in. It feels like yesterday I was filming and editing the first video in this series. I'm really proud of the evolution and the progress that I've made in those 18 episodes. I feel like I have learned so much about filming and editing and all that goes into doing a podcast type of series on YouTube. It's been really fun. And if you're getting sad, don't get sad. We will be continuing on. I have plenty more in store for you. I've already started planning season 2, which will be coming sooner than you think. So if you've liked this series, please subscribe to stay tuned to when the next season will be releasing of Midnight Murmurs. And of course, in between, this is my YouTube channel, so I'll be posting random videos here and there, vlog type episodes, whatever floats my fancy. I hope you're down for that as well. With all that being said, episode 18, cheers, our season 1 is finally legal. We've made it here, you and I, dear listener. I can't believe the road so far and the road of what's to come. This is our final story of our autumn series, reading selections from 100 Wild Little Weird Tales, an anthology of spooky stories that my parents gifted me one Christmas. I've done a random number generator, and today's number is 27. So if you're in the mood for a spooky story, dear listener, I invite you to grab a beverage, kick back, and let's dive in. Today's story is number 27, Escape by Paul Ernst. I wonder what we'll be escaping from. He had the craziest form of craziness I had ever seen. Of course, I hasten to add, I hadn't seen much. I'd been through an asylum once before, as now, to get a story for my paper on treatments and conditions of state inmates, and that was all. On that former trip, I'd witnessed nothing like this, nor had I, till now, on this trip. The man didn't look crazy. So often they don't. He was a medium-sized chap with gray in his hair and a look of sadness on his thin, mild face. A look of sadness and determination. Neatly dressed, precise of movement, he was very busy in his cell. He paid no attention for a while as the guard and I stood at the barred door and watched him. He was building something. He would pick up a tool, adjust it carefully, work with all the delicacy of a watchmaker for a moment. Then he would lay the tool down and pick up a gauge and check his work. All was very accurate and careful. The only thing was that you couldn't see what he was building, and you couldn't see any tools, nor gauges, nor workbench. There was nothing in the cell but the man and a bolted-down cot and chair. Nevertheless, the fellow was extraordinarily industrious. He would seize a non-existent tool, examine it with a frown, and then use it on thin air after which would come the inevitable measuring movements. "It certainly looks," I said in a low tone to the attendant, "as though there should be something there." The attendant grinned and nodded, and I continued to watch, fascinated. You could follow the man through his whole box of tools from his rational movements. Now he was boring a hole, obviously a very small hole, with a tiny metal drill equipped with an egg beater handle. Now he was just touching a surface with a file. Now he was sawing something else, after which he took the sawed part from an imaginary workbench and tried it in its place, whatever and wherever that was. I got still another glimpse of unity of effort as I watched him. Each little period of accurate workmanship ended with a trip 4 steps to his left, to a corner of his cell which was bright with sunlight. There, his motion said, was the thing he was working on. There was the object, slowly growing bit by accurate bit, which he was making and assembling. It was uncanny. There simply ought to have been something there, a cabinet, chair, what not, and there wasn't. The man slowly screwed an imaginary part to an imaginary hole, then laid down his imaginary screwdriver and walked to the door, for the first time acknowledging our presence there. "Hello, Nick," he said to the attendant. His voice was as mild and as sad and as oddly determined as the rest of him. "Hello," said the attendant affably, his good-natured, broad face turned from the man in the cell towards me. "Meet Mr. Freer, Mr. Gannett. Mr. Freer's with the newspaper." "Oh?" said Gannett politely. He put out his hand so I could shake it if I reached through the bars of his door a little. I hesitated, then grasped it. He didn't look dangerous. "How are you doing with your what's-it-is, Gannett?" the attendant said, nodding solemnly towards the bright corner where lay the object of the man's attentions. "Pretty well," said Gannett. "This damned floor isn't quite level. It's 3/32 of an inch to the foot off. I have to allow for that in every line and every angle, and it makes it needlessly difficult." "What is it you're building?" asked Nick wheedlingly. "You won't tell any of us, but won't you tell Mr. Freer for his newspaper story?" "There it is," shrugged Gannett, pointing to the corner. "See for yourself." I stared involuntarily at the corner, then, feeling like a fool, back at his mild, sad face. Was there a ghost of a twinkle in his gray eyes? Or was it my imagination? I couldn't tell. I was beginning to feel a little crazy myself. We walked away. The big library and lounging room where the almost cured could sit and read was left for me to see. But I looked around without much interest as we passed through. I kept thinking of Gannett. "Has he been going through that set of motions very long?" I asked the attendant. "He started right after he got here," said Nick. "That was a year ago. He came here, raving, trying to fight free and get back to the house where he'd lived with his son and daughter-in-law. There was something in his room he had to get, he said. Then he calmed down. And next day began going through the routine you saw. Some days he works only a few hours, some days all day long and up till lights out at night. The way he puttered around that corner made me think I was off myself for not seeing something there," I said. "It was amazingly realistic, as though you surely could feel what he was working on, even though you couldn't see it. Has anybody ever felt around that corner where he spends his time?" "Hey, boy," said Nick. "Easy now. Pretty sure we'll be sending a wagon for you." "But has anybody?" I persisted, smiling. "No. That's the one thing that brings out Gannett's kink. If anyone gets too close to that corner, he gets quite violent. So we don't even clean there. We're trying to cure these folks, not upset 'em needlessly." We went out the massive door of the main building, where a stalwart attendant eyed us sharply. There were nicely kept grounds, and then a high fence with inward slanting barbs on its top. "You don't want anybody to escape from here, do you?" I said, nodding towards the heavy door and the high fence. Nick grinned. "Nope. And nobody ever has. Or ever will, I reckon. See you in church." But he saw me sooner than that. I kept thinking of the spare, mild-mannered man with the sad, determined eyes all evening after I handed my story in to the paper. I kept thinking about him the next morning, and the next afternoon saw me at the asylum again, standing in front of Gannett's barred door. He was as busy as he had been yesterday, but his activity seemed more mental than physical today. He would stand in the center of his cell, hand-rubbing jaw, while he stared at a sunny corner. Then he would walk to the corner and touch a spot in mid-air with an inquisitive forefinger. Then he would step back and survey the atmosphere again, eyes running slowly up and down as though over the lines of a quite tangible thing. Finally, he took something out of his pocket and walked with a more decisive air to the corner. I saw his hands move close together, for all the world as though he were adjusting a micrometer or other delicate measuring device. He applied his hands to the questionable point in nothingness. As he had done yesterday, he paid no attention to observers at his door at first. But finally he spoke, without looking up from his task. "Hello, Freer." "Hello," I said. Gannett had an unimpaired memory at any rate. "Come for another story?" "In a way," I evaded. He shook his head, meanwhile stepping a foot to the right and staring critically at nothing. "I don't see how you stand it." "Stand what?" "Your work. The madness and despair of humanity. That's your stock in trade. You deal in war and famine and flood, in social injustice and political and civil brutalities. They're the intimate facts of your life. I don't see how you can live among such things. I can't even read about them." I stared at him. I'd never met a man who seemed less crazy. "Whether you face the facts intimately or detachedly," I said, "they are still facts, and they're still there. You can't avoid them." "But you can. At least, I can. And I'm going to. I'm getting out of all of this." He squatted on his haunches, then began running his hand slowly over space, up and down, then horizontally. He straightened and repeated the process. I'll swear I could make out what he had in his mind. It was a sort of chair, with a very high back and unusually high arms. Just as I had decided this, he sat in it. You've seen stage tricksters sit in chairs with arms folded when there are no chairs there to sit in? Well, this was the same. I gaped at Gannett, sitting in thin air. Not an impossible stunt, but always an arresting one. He got up and came to the door. "I can't take life as it's lived today, Gannett. A weakness, no doubt, but there you are." "So you're getting out of it?" I nodded. "So I'm getting out of it. It's not for nothing that I am a mathematician and an inventor." What a shame! I almost said it aloud, but didn't. I'd conceived a positive fancy for the sad-faced Mr. Gannett. He stared at me quizzically. "You needn't hunt up Nick," he said. "I'm not hinting at suicide. It's a more literal escape, I mean. Escape? With these barred doors, the high wall outside? Oh, walls. Bars. He waved his hand, dismissing them. He walked back to his sunny corner and resumed his critical ocular and manual examinations of nothing. You may have another story tomorrow, Freer, he said mildly. And then he turned his back, thereby dismissing me as he had the walls and bolts of his confinement. I hunted up Nick on the way out. I felt like a traitor, but I knew it was for my new friend's own good. Gannett's talking of an escape, I said. Nick's customary grin appeared on his broad face. Forget it. He's handed out that line before. Nobody could get out of here. He walked to the high gate in the fence with me and waved as I got into my car. I wasn't coming back anymore. I didn't want to see Gannett again. He was such a nice little guy. But next noon saw me knocking for admittance a third time, summoned by a call from Nick. Got an exclusive for you, if you want it, he said. An escape. I don't know that it's very important to you, but we've never had one before. That might make it worth a couple inches. Escape? I said. Yeah, your man, Gannett. So he did it. But how? Nick grunted. Suppose you tell me. In the night? I asked. He shook his head. A little while ago, in broad daylight, he was seen in his cell at 10. An hour later, the room was empty. He was gone. But he couldn't have simply walked out of the place in broad daylight. No, said Nick. He couldn't. Was his door unlocked? It was not. It was locked from the outside when we came to investigate the report that he was gone. His window bars are all right, too. You've searched the grounds? Of course. He isn't in them. He isn't in any of the buildings. Nobody saw him after 11 o'clock. He's just gone, with his cell still locked so even a monkey couldn't slip out. You must have some idea how he got away. No idea, because it can't be done. Only, it was. How am I going to get a story out of that? I asked. How in thunder would I know? That's your worry. I put a cigarette between my lips unlit because smoking wasn't permitted here. What in the world do you suppose he thought he was building? I mused. Nick snorted. I don't suppose anything about it. If I did, I'd be as crazy as he was. Well, there's your exclusive, if you know what to do with it. I didn't know what to do with it, so I finally handed it in as it stands now. This very story, in fact. And the little man with the big visor at the editor's desk promptly handed it back. Not that I blame him. Nobody ever saw Gannett again. Nobody ever thought of him again, I guess. Except me. I had a rush of curiosity to the head a few days later and went to his cell armed with a level and a steel rule. The floor of the barred cubicle Gannett once occupied is 3/32 of an inch off level. Now, how do you suppose he could have determined that without tools of any kind to aid the naked eye? And that is the end of Escape, dear listener. Ooh, I liked that story. It was fun. It was thought-provoking. Where did Gannett go? What was he building? What did he escape to? He said he was a mathematician and an inventor. Dear listener, I'm interested in your theories. I would love for you to leave a comment below on what you think Gannett was building and where did he escape to. I don't know if he's still planet-side. Maybe he slipped through time and dimension to another timeline. Who knows? Do we think the reporter in this story is now going to catch this madness? I don't know. He's not going to be able to build a machine to escape. I do think it's interesting that the reporter said that he's the only one to remember Gannett's memory, but Gannett said he had a son and a daughter-in-law. They would remember him. Where are they? Let's track them down. The story doesn't have to end here, reporter. We can figure this out. Come on. Well, I can't believe it's the end. We've barely just begun. I appreciate you, dear listener, for taking this journey with me. I hope you've had a wonderful autumn, and I'll see you in the next season. See what I did there? So if you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. So cheers, my friend. Prost. I'll see you in the next video. Ciao. See ya. For now. Put some respect on this cardigan's name. Midnights, midnights, midnights.